So we are here with Michael Kalles. I'm Frank Fallico of the Fallico Group, but it's a true honor to be with you today. I mean, I was telling my wife before we got here, there aren't many people in the world that you get to meet them and then you walk away saying, this is a remarkable person. And I can say that from the first time I met you, that was my impression. And, sometimes they say first impressions are not quite what the person or the individual is. In your case, not only was the first impression mild, but as I've gotten to know you more, I'm more impressed. And I think this interview, and I don't even know if we should call it that, this conversation is more about trying to get into who Michael Kalles is. I mean, I'll share with the audience at large here, 30 years president of Harvey Kalles, 147 million in sales. I think in 2021, our group at Kalles did 4.6 billion, something to that effect. Like really crazy number. Your business accomplishments aside, I think what I like to do, and this is what I normally get into, is let us know who Michael Kalles was before he was president. The high school Michael Kalles. I think, for the audience to get a sense of who you are, I mean, I know you well, but I think that would be an important segue to start, if you would.
Sure. Well, thank you, Frank. I mean, firstly, your kind words are so appreciated, especially coming from someone who I actually admire very much. We're on many calls during the week. We'll be on one today on open mic where people at Harvey Kalles share their personal thoughts about topics that are of interest. And I will tell you that many of your shares I write down and think about and contemplate and try to put them into my life because I really admire your perspective and your view of the world. So thank you for your kind words. If you take your mind back to when I was in high school, frankly, I was always driven, but it wasn't always towards academics. I really found that for me, I wanted to be very involved in sports. I wanted to be involved in social activities. I wanted to be involved in having fun. And I'm not ashamed to say that because I think it made me the person I am today. I find it very easy today to, this past week, and Ace will tell you, my son who's joining us here today, I counted the number of hours just out of interest. I was at my computer for 23 hours on Saturday and Sunday combined. And I don't say that because I feel sorry for myself, but having that opportunity to have a very free and enjoyable high school experience gave me the ability to not look back with any regrets, and also recognize that there is a time, there's a season for everything. There's a time for hard work, which is now, and there is a time for social and sports, and I've had the privilege of being able to enjoy both.
And it kind of shows, I mean, we obviously talked in the past, you were a tennis player and things of that nature. And I'm going to shift gears slightly here. One of the games that we play at home, and it's interesting, we're actually shooting in a vault. So you know what they say, what stays in the vault stays in the vault. But we're hoping you're going to be able to share some stuff like this. So one of the games we play at home, when we watch a movie as a family, I'll often go around the dinner table and say, hey, in that movie, to my son or my daughter, if you had to pick a character that most exemplifies who you were in this movie, which one is it, and what qualities of that character do you feel you exude? And I'm going to pose that question to you. It's a little bit fun-hearted, but I would say of all the great movies and films you've probably watched during the course of your life, is there a standout character for you in any of those? And, I'm going to give you a second to pause and think of it, because I think it's a monumental, conversation to have, which is there a character that exudes some qualities, a lot of qualities, or something in that character that you simply identify with and say, that's the person I try and be like, or that kind of symbolism? Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, frankly, it's not really in movies, but it's the people I try to emulate, the people I try to live up to are philanthropists in Toronto. So it's really, I wish I had a movie that I could quote offhand, but I don't. But when I look around the city of Toronto, and I've sort of come up with a hypothesis that the generation one ahead of me are the greatest philanthropists that the world has ever seen. I happened to be visiting someone at Toronto Western Hospital, as an example, and I was walking by the the board that recognizes givers. And I saw Peter Monk in the group of 100 million plus. Now, people know that there's the Peter Monk Heart Center at the hospital just south of College on the east side. And I think it's called just Toronto General. And yet at Toronto Western, there's no recognition. His name is nowhere.
Wow.
Except a small little chiseled out name. And yet he gave 100 million. And I've heard him speak so many times. He's my brother-in-law's father. And his belief is that he came to the country with nothing, and everything he created, he's grateful for. And he loves the country of Canada, and his philosophy was to give back as much as he could while he was alive. And, you know, the world lost a great Canadian. So it's Peter Monk, it's younger philanthropists, a good friend of mine, Jordan Banks, who gives so much of his time and energy to those less fortunate. And really, those are the people I aspire to become.
That's a remarkable perspective, and it kind of makes sense to me because aside from, you know, when I was trying to become a realtor and deciding on which brokerages to visit, culture, leadership, and those kind of things were really important on my list. So one of the things that I try and observe is, does a company or an organization have a great culture? Because you're obviously coexisting within that culture as an individual. And I can tell you by far, not to pat ourselves on the back, but, you know, the Kalles culture is remarkable. And that was kind of a segue into the next topic, which is, how did you create such a great culture? And what do you feel an organization needs to even qualify as such? Because I think from a leadership perspective, that's missing in a lot of organizations, a lot of brands, just a lot of day-to-day. And I think when you notice something that remarkable, you have to kind of commend it, but not from a egocentric perspective, but more from the way you just said, a charitable perspective, meaning like, what are we doing that creates this great culture of giving back to the community and so forth. But yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on the culture of Kalles, how you got it there as a family, which is a remarkable family in itself, and what you feel a culture needs to have in order to be considered great.
It's an excellent question, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that the culture was established by my parents, Harvey and Elise Kalles. And there's a great expression in child rearing, you know, children do what they see, not what they hear. So, you know, I read a quote last week at our sales meeting that 10,000 wonderful sentiments don't equal the weight of one kind act. And I think that it's important to not just speak about what needs to be done, it's important to do things with your actions. And it's not just money, it's time. And as we all know, time is more expensive and more costly than money. So I would really say it came from my parents. My parents have always believed in giving back. And we believe as a company, as in a family, that anything that we've achieved has come from our community. So if we didn't give back to our community, that would be a big mistake. And we believe that philanthropy is not an option, it's an obligation for everybody, you know. And again, if people don't have extra money and they have extra time, that would be appreciated. So it really came from my parents, and I look even beyond that, and I think about my father's parents as an example. And, you know, if I would come up with one word to describe my dad's parents, Harry and Bertha Kalles, it was just kindness. You know, they weren't incredibly wealthy, but boy, were they ever kind and nice and giving. They didn't have a lot to give, but what they had, they shared.
You know, I can attest to it as a first-time experience when I met your mom. And that's actually how I ended up at Kalles, to be honest with you. I was with RE/MAX. I'm not going to say that too loud, but years ago I was with RE/MAX, and I was part of a deal at arm's length, and I got to meet your mom. And I came out of the meeting saying to my colleague at the time, David Oy, who's also here, as you know, and we said, this is what working in this business should be like, because we had seen a lot of successful people behaving badly for such a long time that we chalked it up as, well, it is what it is. And you hear that said often. But when it came to your mom specifically, it was almost like a beacon of like saying, it doesn't have to be the way it is. You can be remarkably successful and still be the kind of person, as you mentioned, the words kind, that came, to us as well when we first met your mom, and then subsequently your dad and the entire family. So that culture kind of permeates throughout. And from a leadership perspective, we've always been almost admiring that, and we try and instill that in our own business. So we look at that, and this is kind of a segue as well into the question, which is, leadership is, and my mom used to say this to me, it's really easy to lead when everything is calm. And I remember years ago, there was a ship's captain, I think he happened to be Italian, where when the ship was going down, he was one of the first to get off and was criticized. And kind of brings me up to this question, which is, what do you do when you're experiencing real difficulty, real pain? And as a leader, how do you get through that? And I don't know if there's something that you can share with folks, like through the course of your life. Is there something that is a beacon or crystallization of real pain for you, how you dealt with it, and maybe that might be able to help people out there, given that we know the context of the world in today, and we're not going to get into too much of that, but pain is a high check mark thing for a lot of people coming out of COVID, the stuff that's happening in the world. And from such a great leader, I think our audience could benefit from saying, what pain did you experience, if you can share, and then how did you overcome it, and are you still maybe even overcoming it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to close the circle on something you brought up before about success, and I would say to our son Ace that being nice and successful aren't mutually exclusive. You can be successful and nice at the same time. But I want to get to your question, and we just finished our commercial meeting, and I was talking about just business pressures. So if I were to look at today, just today, I would say we are dealing with, I'll just name a few. So there's class action lawsuits against organized real estates in the US and Canada. We've got the mansion tax coming in January 1st. We have vacancy tax going from 1% to 3% coming in January 1st. We have TRESA being introduced December 1st, changing the entire real estate landscape. We have a challenging market. 2023 will be probably the lowest unit sales year in the last 7. Wow. You have the last 2 interest rate announcements, both stayed at 5%, but you've gone from interest rates at a quarter point, Bank of Canada, to 5%. You've got inflation still, unfortunately beyond the threshold number that the Bank of Canada looks towards. So I'm just looking at these pressures. So I always say this, that if one of these things happened during a month or a quarter, you'd say, wow, that's a big challenge. But 5 or 6 at the same time are incredibly challenging. And the answer to your question is, for me personally, what helps me is focusing on what I can control. It's very difficult to focus on things that, I take that back. It's actually quite easy to focus on things that you can't control, but it's not productive. So every day I wake up, I think to myself, okay, here's my day. Yesterday I was at my desk at 5 in the morning. I had a presentation at 9 in the morning with a number of salespeople. The fact of the matter is wake up, work hard, do what you can do, try to make a difference, try to make someone's tour through this life a little bit easier. And I find that when I'm at a low point, I find that helping others who are at a low point helps me. And that's my way out of challenging times. And, one of the things that I'm not great at, which is one of many things, is asking for help, sharing the way I feel. I'm very stoic, I try to be, and I try to sort of go through things on my own. That's not a strength, that's a weakness. And that's something I aspire towards being better at as I go through this, this wonderful thing that we call life.
You bring a lot of things to mind when you say the things you do, in the sense that, some of my most happiest moments, I would say, was when I was a child. And a lot of us can probably, if we had great childhoods, can kind of revert back and say, yeah, I was happiest as a child. And a lot of that comes down to what you kind of just said as an adult, not trying to control things. So as a youngster, you're not thinking about trying to control your world. You're just living in it and enjoying it. And then as we become adults and more responsibilities get tagged on as fathers, mothers, and so forth, we start wanting to control environments the best we can to either protect our kids. And then I see this in myself, you know what I mean? That you end up trying to do the best you can to control the environment for your kids, that you just start marinating in the idea that you should be able to control everything. And the truth of the matter is that you're not. And I think, having that insight is really incredible. And on that note, I think, I know we're running tight on time, but it's something that was really important for me to ask, from father to father is, we teach our kids a whole lot of things. But I will say for myself, the kids teach me things all the time. Is there something that you could share that you feel your children have shared with you that have taught you something that you either knew about and forgot, or has crystallized something new for you? I think would be powerful to share.
Well, I've got 4 kids, and each one of them is unique in their own way, and I'll tell you what I've learned from each. So from Olivia, it's unbridled kindness. She's 23 years old in Teachers College, and just gives everybody a chance, gives everybody an opportunity, always thinks the best of people, always gives people the benefit of the doubt. Mariah, our middle daughter, she's finishing off at McGill. I would say it's determination. She played what I would consider high-level competitive volleyball, yet, if you saw her, she's not very tall. She doesn't look like she would be a great player, but she works at it. And she's had highs and lows. She's, been at the top, and there's been time where she's been benched, and she's handled both of them with grace and composure. Emma, who's 21 at Western in 3rd year, just fun, humor, hard work, always finds the funny part of life and is able to express that. She's very quick-witted and just has a great perspective, just always, looking for the bright side of life. And Ace, who's with us today, our son, I would say that it's interesting. His role is bringing happiness to our family, and being the 4th child, he's got 3 older sisters who are all big personalities, yet he just sees the world through a wonderful perspective. And I think one of the things that I've always aspired towards and haven't been able to achieve it, but Ace has, is being present where he is. Not, I wish I was here, I wish I was there, I wish this was different. He's where his feet are, and that's something I'm still working towards, haven't been able to achieve it, but Ace was put on this earth to make it a brighter and a happier place, and he certainly achieves that every single day.
That's amazing. And listen, I can tell you, again, father to father, I can totally see, the things that you're expressing. And, one thing that is kind of remarkable is that we sometimes take little things for granted, and then when you kind of bring them to the forthright the way you just did, it's illuminating. Because again, going back to, when we first started this conversation, I get it. People out there probably, watch and say, here we go, a couple of guys in real estate. How interesting is it really? But the truth of the matter is, I feel like real estate isn't really what we do. What we really are doing every day is helping people's lives on where they live, how they live, whom they're living with matters. And to me, those kind of conversations are infinitely more interesting. And that's kind of what I marinate in. I think our team marinates in that kind of philosophy. And I think, shifting gears a little bit to get into real estate, one of the things that I know eludes a lot of people when they're considering who to use in real estate is, when you hear Royal LePage, RE/MAX, Home Life, you understand that they're in real estate. You don't have to say much more in that respect. But it is difficult for most people to figure out, hey, am I going to use a company like Harvey Kalles versus RE/MAX versus... So I find that the public at large treats real estate very similar to the banks, whereas CIBC exists, TD exists, RBC exists, but if you have to ask somebody, well, what are the differences between the banks? Most of them might be able to tell you the colors and the logo, but beyond that, they kind of fall short. But when it comes to something, let's say, as simple as a car, if you say, hey, what's the difference between a Honda and a BMW? Somebody will probably have a 20-minute conversation with you telling you those differences. Or if you ask somebody, the difference between Nike and Reebok or anything else for that matter that they're into, they'll really know. But here's like one of the most important transactions of one's life, about to pick a brokerage, and they can't really tell you the differences between the brokerages. If you had, let's say in a minute or less, say, hey, why somebody would pick one brokerage versus another, what do you think are some of the high criteria items that somebody should consider when looking at that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, one of the things I always say for clients is, I was at a client meeting with one of our agents yesterday and they were going out of town. And I said, just remember, call me anytime, 24/7. I'm available. Anything you need when you're out of town, we're here for you. I'm a non-selling manager, and clients know that they can reach out. I answer my own phone. I answer it on the weekends, weeknights, around the clock. And I would say with Kalles, we care. We really, truly care. We want people to be happy and content with their transaction. If things need work, if a relationship needs tweaking between the agent and the seller and or the buyer, we step in. We do everything we can to help out to make things better for the client. We're client-centric, but we're also agent-centric. And when you're agent-centric, when everything we do is for our salespeople, it permeates and it trickles down to the client relationship. Every agent knows that they can call upon anyone in our management team or admin team, and we're all here to help. We're all here for our agents, and our agents are here for our clients. And we, as a management team, we are all completely committed to this business. It's not part-time. We live it, we breathe it, and we're a family business, not just in name, but in the way we practice. I would always describe us as a professionally run family business. But at the core of everything we do, we call it the Kalles way. And, my father made the decision to put our family name on our company logo. And that means that every transaction, every relationship affects our reputation. And it's a risk to do that, right?
100%. You know what? And I couldn't agree more. I think that's one of the things that drew me to this organization is that fact is that if somebody's willing to put their name on it, they're going to stand behind it, right? So much different than, let's say, somebody purchasing, a Remax franchise and, hey, if it doesn't work, I can walk away from it. Well, nobody's walking away from their own name. It's something that, as you said, reputation, you got to live into it. And a family as dedicated as yours is something that I think the rest of the realtors that are part of this bigger family kind of buy into, at least from my perspective. Now, I know we're tight on time, so I'm going to maybe finish with this last question, which is, and we know you don't have a crystal ball, but when we look at the amount of sales that Kalles does, obviously people are a little bit anxious about where things are going. If you had to give a prediction that we're not going to hold you to, but where you think the next 12 months might be taking this crazy real estate market, I'm sure people are on their edges of their chair, on where this thing's going. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I think, look, I was at a conference last week with the president of the World Bank, and one of the things he said was so basic, but he said, look, when interest rates are down, property sales, property prices go up, and it works in the reverse order. So we've gone from a quarter point to 5%. That's 475 basis points since March of 22, and it's had an effect on the market. Unit sales are down, but yet prices have maintained. The one thing I think we can all agree on is that if you look at the real estate market in Toronto, let's take it back to 1986. If you've bought and held a home for 7 years, in any time, in any of those markets, you've made money. So what other investment can you say that with? And I use 7 years because that's the average time people spend in a home. So I think medium and long term, we're going to be fine. But I think currently, with the rate environment that we're in, it is going to be more difficult. But I say this all the time. It's a challenging market. But it was a challenging market in 2021 where there was 20 offers on every property. So it was challenging for buyers in 21. Now it's more challenging for sellers. But if you're buying and selling in the same market, it can't be easy on both ends. So today, as a buyer, you've got more choice. We've got 4 months supply, which is the highest supply that we've had in 27 years. So as a buyer, you can take your time, you can put in an offer conditional upon inspection, you can come in and have more optionality. But as a seller, it's taking more time. Showings are not as prevalent, multiple offers aren't as prevalent. But the one thing I will say for certain, if you look at the immigration numbers coming to Canada, they talk about, 523,000 by 2024. But if you include all of the people that are coming to Canada on work visas, temporary work visas, student visas, immigration coming out of certain countries, we're closer to 1 million a year. So population has grown 2.9%. We're above 40 million in Canada right now. And the one thing all of these new Canadians aren't bringing with them is a home. They need homes. And people keep saying, oh my God, I can't believe there's a glut of property. What will end up happening in the not too distant future is all of these buyers who are sitting on the sideline waiting for what they would call an opportunity, they're going to come off the sidelines all at the same time, and it's going to drive the prices up and it's going to drive the supply down. We are still, no matter how you slice it, with all the immigration numbers, we're still in a low supply environment. And just because we have 4 months of it doesn't mean we're in a, as a gross number, we do not have the supply to handle all the new Canadians who are coming to this country. And demographics. So medium and long term, I'm incredibly bullish. Will we see some challenging times for sellers in the short term? Yes, I believe so.
Well, you heard it from the man himself. Optimism from somebody who's been doing it for a long, long time. And yes, as myself, we see the cyclicalness in it. And you're right. Sometimes a buyer, had difficulty, trying to win in bidding wars. And now the buyer has the next level of difficulty is like, at what point do you pull that trigger? Because our price is still going down. And then you catch yourself at almost becoming too analytical and you start to freeze yourself. But
I'm going to jump in and interrupt you. I'm sorry about this. But one thing that I thought about is that I really firmly believe that in a very short period of time, be it 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, we're going to look back at this interview and say, wow, there were some serious buying opportunities then. Buyers, always like to look for the bottom, quote unquote, of the market. But I think we are going to look back at this and say, and I think a lot of buyers who bought during this time are going to be very grateful that they did. I don't think the opportunities will be here 6, 9, 12 months into the future. So it's a good time to get off the sidelines. Be a pioneer. Don't wait for other people to drive prices up and reduce your optionality. Get off the sidelines now and recognize that there are some opportunities that will not be here in the short, medium, and long term definitively.
Absolutely. And I the numbers starting to reflect that. And I agree. I think Canadians in general were sometimes pegged with aim, and maybe then fire. So sometimes it's tough for us to get off the sideline, just given culturally, but I've seen it with buyers so often. Well, listen, Mike, on that note, I know that, again, your time is precious and we appreciate the time today. We look forward to maybe some future conversations just like this. Again, Frank Fallico, the Fallico Group, Michael Kalles of Harvey Kalles.
Thank you.
Incredible. And this was just a taste, as we say, for people coming forward. But we thank you again.
I'm very grateful that you had me on, and I had a great time.